Welcome back, everybody. It's the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast brought to you by Reality Sports Online. I'm your host, Scott Bogman. Follow me on the Twitter at Bogman Sports. And today we're going to be talking about players we do want to take in your Dynasty startup drafts. Last week we went to the guys to avoid, but today we're going to be talking about the guys we want. Before we dive into the meat of the show, I got some stuff to tell you guys about. Don't forget, we have the giveaway for a Cam Akers autographed helmet we're doing right now. All you need to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasypros. Take a screenshot, submit it to fantasypros.com/dynasty contest. That's fantasypros.com/dynasty contest. And you are entered in. Do it ASAP. This contest ends on the 31st, so get in as soon as you can. And also, like I just mentioned, our YouTube. This podcast is also on our YouTube channel, along with all of our other podcasts, quick hitting videos, and live streams. Please subscribe if you like our content because it really helps us out, and click the bell to get notified of our latest content so that you don't miss any of our podcasts at all. Make sure you are there. Pat Fitzmaurice at Fitz_FF, of course, here as always. How was your weekend, my man? Ready to talk some football?
I am, Boggs. It was good. And yeah, this is like the part of year where I'm normally ready to wish away summer so we can get to football season. But I'm actually having a really good fantasy baseball season. It's been kind of a dream start. So I'm going to savor summer a little bit more than normally, but still excited to talk football, of course.
I mean, at some point, the baseball season will drag you down into where you want football to start. We all know.
Yes.
Anyone who's played baseball knows that. And I know our guest here, Andrew Seifter, you have done some baseball before. You're featured MLB and NFL writer here at Fantasy Pros. You also co-host the Rest of the Season Rankings podcast, and you have your website, rosrankings.com. Thank you for joining us. And how's the off season? I'm throwing up air quotes, treating you so far, my friend?
Oh, we all know there's no off season in this business, right, guys?
Yeah.
Well, and especially when you're doing the baseball stuff too, like I am. So I'm living my greatest fantasy life, and really excited to be here. You know, long-time listener, first-time caller, as they say. So pleased to join you guys today.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And we got a lot to talk about because, you know, last week we kind of talked, it's the negative show, the hater show, as we would say, you know, the guys that we don't want. Now we can be enthusiastic about players that we do want to go out and acquire because they're either being drafted too low, they're valued too low, however it is in your leagues, right, Pat? You know, whether it's a trade or a startup draft, these are the guys that we are looking to acquire because they're deals right now, in our opinion. So we're going to start at quarterback, Andrew. Why don't you go ahead and lead us off and give us a quarterback or two that you think is being undervalued right now?
Sure. So, you know, I usually come at this quarterback question from a super flex perspective. I think, you know, that's the leagues I like to play. And I think with Dynasty in particular, you see that most often. And, you know, I wrote this article for Fantasy Pros about startup strategy for super flex leagues, part of our Dynasty draft kit there. And, you know, one thing I talked about in there was I really want to get two locked in top QB1s that I can feel great about every single week. And, you know, there's a bunch of guys that are in that like age 28 and younger area. And those guys are just unobtainable, basically. Like you just can't buy them, right? But to me, there's a little pocket. And I know Fitz is not a big Russell Wilson fan, but to me, it's Russell Wilson and Matthew Stafford are in this little kind of bubble of these guys that are like kind of old, but not that old. So like, it's not like going out and getting Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, where you're going to have this really small window to compete. Like you can get a Russell Wilson or a Matthew Stafford and you can compete for 4 or 5 years with those guys, because the way quarterbacks last nowadays, you can do that. And I will side with Pat in the having some question about Wilson because he's in a totally new situation. So there's some question marks there. So that's why my pick is Matthew Stafford, because there's no question to me about him. You know, he went to a new place last year and we saw how great it was. I mean, it was pretty much the perfect season he could have. He finished as the QB6. He won the Super Bowl. If anything,
last 2 years in a row, by the way, Brady dropped into Tampa Bay, won a Super Bowl, and then Stafford drops in with LA and wins the Super Bowl. So, I mean, it looks like Russell, you know, he at least he's got some catching up to do here, at least, right?
For sure. Yeah. And, you know, with Stafford, if anything you could say, I would say maybe he upgraded his weapons. Allen Robinson, I've always been a huge fan of his game. He's had to deal with so many mediocre quarterbacks over the years. And now I really feel like he's going to have a massive year with Stafford. Cam Akers being back, I think he's got some ability as a receiver out of the backfield. So I think that gives Stafford another weapon, having him all season long. So I feel like Stafford is this one quarterback you can get who can be a locked-in QB1, top 10 kind of a guy for the next 3, 4, 5 years. And the price really isn't that exorbitant. I think he's like QB 13 in the rankings right now. So I would take him over some of these guys whose value could really disappear overnight, like a Jalen Hurts or even a Trevor Lawrence or Trey Lance. I just feel like with Stafford, you know exactly what you're getting. Unless you're doing like a total rebuild from scratch, then I might prefer those young guys. But otherwise, I want to know what I'm getting, and I feel like Stafford's the guy.
Yeah, I like that call, and that's part of drafting a dynasty in general is the crusty vets, as you would say, guys that are borderline in a tier, whether it's, for QBs, usually it's only 1 or 2 tiers, right? But, whether it's running backs, wide receivers, any position, the older guys are just going to get pushed down a little bit more and come at a value. So I like that call. Is there a deeper one that you have too, or is Stafford your main guy?
No, I do have another one as well. I'm all in on the Jameis Winston bandwagon at this point. Yeah,
All right, I like it.
I think I actually do have him in a league I play in with some other Fantasy Pros folks, and I've shopped him around a little bit because I got Mahomes and I've got Lamar Jackson in that league, so he's kind of a luxury roster for me. But I feel like people aren't fully appreciating how what kind of upside Jameis Winston brings to the table this season. I mean, we saw in his Tampa days that he could play YOLO ball. He could make any throw down the field. He'd also throw a lot of picks. Bruce Arians kind of just let him roll, and we saw the good and the bad in those days. Then he comes to New Orleans. He holds the clipboard. He studies under Drew Brees a little. Gets his first opportunity to play last year, and they have him play very conservatively. But he plays very efficient football. So now we've kind of seen everything from him. We've seen him put up the massive fantasy stats, the 30 touchdown, 30 interception year. We've also seen him play very efficient football where he throws a lot, had a 5 touchdown game last year. Just very efficient, very few picks.
In 2019, he led the league in passing yards. So people forget that.
Yeah. And even last year, he was QB 14 in points per game. He missed half the season, but then you look at the weapons that they brought in. I mean, last year he was throwing to Marquez Callaway. He's throwing to Traquan Smith. There wasn't a lot there. Now all of a sudden he's got Michael Thomas back. They draft Chris Olave. Then they sign Jarvis Landry. I mean, that's a lot of weapons coming to the table there for Jameis Winston. You combine that. We don't know what Kamara's status is, but I would assume he plays most of the season, and he's one of, if not the best receiving back in the entire league. So, I mean, that's a full house of weapons for Jameis Winston to work with. So I feel like he actually has, if he can kind of channel the best of both worlds, the big time throws he made with Tampa and the kind of more smart decision making he showed last year, if he can kind of channel both of those things, I think he could actually be even a low end QB1 this season.
I love it. These are great calls, Andrew, and bringing the heat, Pat. He comes in here, he stiffs arm fits on his Russell Wilson call, and gives us a couple guys. I love both these calls. What do you think of Stafford and Jameis, Pat?
Well, it's funny that he's stiff arming me on the Russell Wilson call because I am a Wisconsin fan and Andrew is a University of Michigan fan. Like, we're trying to live in harmony here, and he's shirt today. So, and he's calling me out for giving shade to the Wisconsin guy, which is good catch on his part. So I like both those calls a lot. Yeah, Winston, it is interesting that he goes from leading the league in pass attempts in 2019 to averaging, I think, 23 pass attempts a game for the Saints last year, just a super low number. So that's probably going to wind up, evening itself out a little bit. But yeah, there is, with Marquez Callaway going from his number 1 receiver last year to maybe the number 4 receiver this year, yeah, big weapons upgrade. And I still like that offensive line, even without Armstead. So, and I like the Stafford call too. Pretty much if he is on a team in your Dynasty League where the elevator is going down, like, he is a reasonable target because that team is going to want to get younger and is probably willing to deal Stafford away. So he's a realistic trade target. I do worry a little bit about the retirement of Andrew Whitworth and what that offensive line is looking like. Even though I'm a Wisconsin fan, I don't think Logan Bross is going to be a 1-for-1 replacement for Andrew Whitworth. But still, like, we've never seen that Sean McVay offense completely flounder I think it's still going to be a pretty prolific.
Not like
offense.
Stafford isn't used to running a little bit, playing for the Lions for
And,
years.
and playing through injuries
exactly.
too.
And
True,
playing through
true.
injuries.
He's always
Very
playing
true.
through injuries.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I like both of those.
They don't give him
calls.
many Mississippis back there in Detroit. So
No,
you know.
no.
So Fitzy, who do you have? Who are you buying on right now in Dynasty League?
All right, so I'm aiming a little higher here, and this guy's not going to come for free, but I'm hoping that maybe there's still just a little bit of a sliver of a crack in that buy window for Trey Lance with Jimmy Garoppolo still around in San Francisco. Maybe there's some doubt about, who's starting in week 1. I know there was a report, I don't know if it was erroneous or valid, about maybe the organization not completely enamored with Trey Lance yet. But I think this guy's just going to rock as soon as he gets in, and I think he's going to start in week 1. Just a cheat code quarterback with his running ability. In his 2 starts last year, I think he had 24 rushing attempts. He is going to be, if not quite as electric a runner as Lamar Jackson, at least a Kyler Murray-esque, if not even more prolific of a runner. And, even though the passing ability is the question, I mean, he does have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle to throw to, and he's running the Kyle Shanahan playbook. So I'm feeling pretty good about him. Like, I think he can be a quarterback 1 immediately. I'd almost be disappointed if he was not that. So if there are any doubts, I mean, it's going to take a hefty sum for you to pry him away from even a somewhat cautious, skeptical Trey Lance investor, but I think it's going
to look cheap next year, right?
It will. Yep. That's the way I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm completely with you here on the Trey Lance call. The guy offers the crazy legs upside of a top 5 runner immediately. He's right there. He's going to run because he's a young quarterback, so he's going to bail out and pull a couple down that probably he shouldn't. But sometimes that's good for us in fantasy. That is what makes Jalen Hurts. This is why everyone in the fantasy industry, it seems like, hates Jalen Hurts. He's not that good of a quarterback, but he runs, so he gets his points. So he's an elite level fantasy guy, but in the NFL, he's middle of the road, So it would not be surprising. Plus, it doesn't seem like they're very enamored with him in Philly. So I love this call because this is a chance. This is kind of the get on board because it's the last chance you can buy Trey Lance cheap. Andrew, what do you think of Trey Lance? Are you on board with this call?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can go wrong getting a guy who could easily be a top 5 type of dynasty quarterback going forward. I mean, there's a little bit of risk, because we haven't seen him do it yet. But to me, there's less risk with him than there is, say, with Jalen Hurts, because of the draft capital that they expended in getting Trey Lance on their roster. They've really made a huge commitment to him, and I feel like they're going to want to see that through. So I agree with Fitz. I would expect him to start in week 1. And even if you had the unthinkable and you had Jimmy Garoppolo play much of this season, I mean, say like Trey Lance starts off the season rough and they lose a few games early on, it's not unthinkable to me. They could, if Jimmy Garoppolo is still on that roster, that they could go back to him. But even if that happens, I don't think that that's a long-term derailment for Trey Lance's stock. I think like he's the long-term solution there. Jimmy Garoppolo, even if he's there one more season, that's going to be the last season. He's going to be a free agent after this year, and I imagine he'll be somewhere else. He might even be somewhere else in the next month or two once the trade price comes down a little bit for him, and once he's healthy, and can be shopped. But yeah, I mean, I just think, like I said at the top, like if you wanted to acquire a Kyler Murray or a Lamar Jackson or someone like that, it's just not possible. Like in a lot of leagues, like you just can't, there's nothing you can put together. You could say, I'll give you 3 firsts and people will still roll their eyes at you, Right. So a guy like Trey Lance, he could, we could be having this conversation in 3 or 4 months time, and he's in the same conversation with those guys. So I agree. It's kind of, if you want to, shoot for the moon and go for that truly elite quarterback, and he will produce QB1 numbers just based on the rushing upside alone. Yeah, I mean, this is the opportunity to do that.
I'm going to reach a little further down the board here. I'm going to go to Zach Wilson. And look, Zach Wilson did not look good last year. And I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that he is going to be a QB1 at any point soon. But what I will say is that they are surrounding him with the weapons to put him in that category. They went out, they drafted Garrett Wilson. Before that, they did everything they possibly could to trade for Debo. Didn't work out, but Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore is coming back. He only started, I think, 9 games last season. I think he played 10. So he just wasn't around a lot last year. They went out and they got Breece Hall to add with Michael Carter in that backfield. They signed CJ Uzama and drafted Jeremy Ruckert. They're doing everything they possibly can to put Zach Wilson in a successful environment here. So right now he's going off around QB 19, so kind of the end of the second tier. I just think that a lot of the times he's going to be that third quarterback on a team that you can throw in an extra deal and get him for very cheap. Maybe someone has 4 quarterbacks. You can get him for a second round, first year player draft, a rookie pick, something like that. I just think his value is fairly low coming off his rookie season in which, his weapons were not there. And they have bolstered his offense so much this offseason that I think, he could be in the upper echelon of quarterbacks. It's a coin flip, but it's a cheap coin flip right now. This is, this isn't a lottery ticket like, the one you have a better shot of getting struck by lightning twice. It's more of a scratcher. It's like a 1 in 5. So that's what I think about Zach Wilson. Fitz, your thoughts about Zach Wilson moving forward here?
I agree. I like what they're building around him. And we know Zach Wilson has an improving supporting cast. We know he has traits. The question, does he have those certain intangibles that a successful quarterback needs, that je ne sais quoi? And some guys have that
it factor.
The it factor. And some guys have it, like, Joe Burrow has the it factor. And, some guys have that, and some guys are named Sam Darnold and, never pan out. So we don't know if Zach Wilson is going to be another Sam Darnold. I hope, knock wood for the Jets fans, that he's not. But so far, it's encouraging. Like, there's room for optimism here. So I'm cautious. Like, I'm not going to lie, the palms would be a little sweaty trading for Zach Wilson. But I'm optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic. He is cheap.
That's cheap. The whole point. You're not going to get. He's either going to be worth way more than he is this year. It's kind of like Trey Lance, but at it's the Kmart version. You know what I mean? Like,
he's cheap-ish. Like in Superflex, he's not that cheap.
Okay,
he's affordable.
Well, but here's the way to look at it, though, and I'm in on this one too.
Okay, good.
I love the weapons they put around him, and the way I look at it is look at this 2022 quarterback class that we're dealing with here. I mean, if Zach Wilson was available in this draft, where would he be going in a dynasty rookie draft this year? I mean, he would be going miles ahead of Kenny Pickett. I can tell you that. Yeah. And Kenny Pickett, I've been seeing going some leagues he's going like 1-2 or something like that.
He's the only quarterback. If you have no quarterback, he's your only option. So.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the draft I did. He went 1-5, and it's like, I would never take Kenny Pickett over any of the top wide receivers in this draft class, but Zach Wilson, I would think about it, So I think there's like, that's the thing. I mean, I feel like if you can trade 2022 draft capital to get Zach Wilson, like if you need a quarterback, I'd much rather do that than spend a first round rookie pick on Kenny Pickett, or even an early second on a, Desmond Ridder or Malik, or anyone like that. It's just go for this guy. I mean, he's got the year of experience. He's got the weapons. He had great college tape. I mean, he looked like Patrick Mahomes at times in college, and made all. He can make all the throws.
So, yeah, exactly. That's the whole thing. Is he going to, like Pat said, he's either going to go. He's going to go one way or the other. He ain't going to stand still. We know that because we get to see him again this year. So, it could be you trade for Zach Wilson and Mike White is the starter at the end of the year, or whoever off the scrap heap. That's a possibility, but I do think that he's very cheap in a lot of leagues right now because people are disappointed from what he did last year. And that's always, like, to me, it's just with rookies in general. Rookies are, if you're drafting them within, the entire grouping of players here, like you're doing a startup and the rookies are just in there, they're always going off too low, I feel like. A little bit lower. They're coming fairly cheap unless it's, like a Saquon Barkley, like a generational type of prospect that everyone has talked up for months and months. We don't really have that in this draft class because the wide receivers are cheap. because wide receiver is deep and the running backs are okay, so I just think they will go in general a little bit too late. And also guys that come in their rookie year and don't perform immediately, they get pushed off. NFL, not for long, right? They get pushed off to be fairly low values, and you can snap them up for cheap, I feel like, in general. But before we move over to running backs here, I just want to tell you guys about Reality Sports Online. By now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test your general manager skills for free, FREE, in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. All right, Andrew, let's move over to running backs here and give us one or two that you think are being undervalued right now.
Sure. So I was thinking about this question, and I think it's especially tough with running backs. It's very dependent on like where you are in your contention window, because it's easy, it's easy to say that like guys like Leonard Fournette and James Conner are buys. It's also easy to say that they're sells. It really depends if you're going in this year or not.
You can squint and see it either way on most running backs. I'm right.
Exactly. So and I was thinking about it in terms of my own team because it's one of these teams where it's like, I've got a lot of older players. They're really good players. I feel like I'm going in this year, but I don't want to like recklessly go all in and put myself in this massive hole where if it all blows up in my face, then all the guys are too old to get any draft capital back in deals, and I'm just sort of stuck, So I was trying to think: are there at the running back position players you can get who you can have it both ways? You know what I mean? And to me, the type of running backs that do that are the guys who are technically second on their team's depth chart, but they're still going to get plenty of action. They're still going to provide some immediate value. They have an older running back behind them or in front of them that's kind of on the decline, and there's going to be more and more opportunity as we move forward. And to me, the top guy, I think we're going to be talking about another one of these guys that I would also put in this group. But first, I'll mention my guy. It's Tony Pollard with the Cowboys. I think we saw Zeke kind of declined some the last couple of years. He still put up great fantasy numbers because it's such a fantasy friendly environment there in Dallas, and particularly the way they used Zeke was incredibly fantasy friendly. So he still put up great fantasy numbers, but I feel like it's going to just get slightly worse as we go along with Zeke. I can't see him having some new juice in his legs all of a sudden, and Pollard is one of the most efficient running backs there is in the entire game. I believe he was first among all running backs in yards per route run last year, second in yards per touch. So, I mean, this is a guy, believe it or not, of all running backs who had over 100 carries, the only guy who had more yards per carry than him was Rashad Penny. So, I mean, he was right up there with Jonathan Taylor and Nick Chubb. I mean, now you can say, okay, well, how much of a workload can he carry? I mean, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but I definitely think he's one of these running backs that can run between the tackles. He can handle a good 15 touches a game at least and be very productive with that work. It's a great offense. It's going to be a great offense for a long time with Dak Prescott. And so I just really like the upside. I feel like, Pollard last year was like a high-end RB3 at the end of the season, but that's like his floor to me. Like, I think he can be an RB2 right away. And then I think as Zeke sort of fades out of the picture, I think he could eventually become a really high-end RB2 or maybe even an RB1.
Yeah, I mean, right now he's going off around in ECR. He's ranked around 30. Fitz, what do you think about Tony Pollard and his future in Dallas? Obviously, Zeke is still there. They paid Zeke a bunch of money, but it might be a blessing in disguise for Pollard that they paid Zeke this much money because they're probably not going to go out and spend more money at the position. It's probably just going to be Pollard moving forward, him and Zeke in tandem, right?
Yeah, same old wouldn't be too bad. And then if anything does happen to Zeke, it's a total windfall for Pollard. Yeah. So, and I've got Pollard, I think, in like half of my Dynasty League teams. I just took him in a Fantasy Pros in-house startup draft. I just took him earlier today on a Dynasty mock draft startup podcast with Joe Pisapia and Derek Brown and Jake Seeley. So yeah, I'm all on board. I mean, very, very efficient, as Andrew said. He's just been the more dynamic of the two backs the last 2 years. Really good in the passing game. I think we've seen that Mike McCarthy wants to use two backs in that offense. And, um, the worst case scenario is that he is maybe a player like Kenyon Drake, who we clamor for to be more than a committee back. And then he gets that larger share, and we're disappointed with what we see from him as a more of a workhorse. But like that's the worst case, and I do think Pollard is a better, more explosive player than Kenyon Drake was. So I'm very much on board with this call.
And one more point about Pollard. Also, I think he's due for some positive touchdown regression because I think there's an assumption that he never gets the ball in the red zone because because Zeke is such this red zone warrior. But Pollard actually had 23 touches in the red zone last year, only 2 touchdowns in the red zone. And I think that's not so much a testament to his lack of ability to get it done as much as just statistical noise. So I think if he gets similar usage again this year, you could easily see him get 5, 6, 7 touchdowns, and he had over 1,000 total yards from scrimmage last year. So you give him an extra 5 touchdowns, and he's going to look a lot better in that end of season fantasy rankings.
I think he'll have even a couple more breakaways too, because the dude is fast. So if he's getting, even if it's 2 or 3 more touches a game, the chances of him taking one to the house, I feel like, is going to be better as well. Fitz, who do you have at the running back position? Because it looks like, between me and Andrew and you have the sexy guys here.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna name one. I'm gonna go with AJ Dillon because I think he's like a reasonable target. He's affordable, not necessarily cheap, but I know in the Fantasy Pros consensus Dynasty rankings, he's 24th. I've got him 20th. And I don't think people realize that from week 8 on last year, AJ Dillon was the RB11 in PPR scoring. Like he never caught passes at Boston College, but was actually really efficient, caught 34 of 37 targets last year. I think he averaged like 8.5 yards per catch and 9.2 yards per target. And like it actually looked good. He can catch balls outside the frame of his body. The other thing down the stretch last year, it was kind of subtle, but he became more of like the 1A in the early downs and in the running game. Like over the last 10 games, he and Aaron Jones played 8 games together. And in those 8 games, Dillon averaged, I want to say 13.7 carries a game, and Jones averaged like 10.2. So there was a pretty clear carry advantage for Dillon. And yet we're seeing this big gap between the two in redraft this year. Like Dillon or Aaron Jones is getting drafted, I think RB13 and Dillon RB25. Like I think it's going to be less of a gap like that in redraft. And then, Dynasty, when you factor in the Dillon is this younger back and, still at a really attractive price point, I think.
And there's many reasons to love Dillon, I feel like, Pat, because number one is if something should happen to Aaron Jones, Dillon is a guy that can just take everything.
Yes.
This dude can come in and step up and be the every down back, every single snap. He can catch. He wasn't asked to do it at Boston College, but you have talked about many times on this show, Pat, about how his catching is underrated and it's something he can do. I don't know that he's going to turn out like, we saw Leonard Fournette with 1 million targets this year or anything, but he can do it. This is a guy that is one of the few running backs left in the NFL that can take 30 touches and do it if asked. And I know they signed Aaron Jones to a contract. They want to use him in tandem, but knowing that, plus the fact that Aaron Rodgers ain't going to be in Green Bay forever. He's not going to be there forever. He's probably got 1 or 2 years left. And then you want to start turning around and handing the ball off more. There could be extra, a little bit of tread left on the tire for a 26, 27-year-old running back like AJ Dillon because he split with Aaron Jones. Yeah. So I just do not see the downside to taking Dillon at all. What do you think here, Andrew, on Dillon?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally on board with this. To me, Dylan and Pollard are the two guys. Like they're the two guys. They're very similar situations. They're both technically number 2 on the depth chart, but they're going to have immediate value and they have just tons of upside. And with Dylan, I mean, yeah, I think what you said is absolutely true. Like even before Aaron Rodgers leaves, Devontae Adams is already gone. So I think
Right.
you already could see more of a shift to the running game there. Obviously Dylan is built for the red zone. He's built to handle carries inside the 5-yard line. He's built for the cold weather and, as they lean more heavy on the running game in the second half of the season. So I think it's no coincidence that we saw his fantasy value spike as the season went along. I think we're seeing more of an evolution in how Green Bay is approaching their backfield, where they're making use of Aaron Jones's receiving ability more, but they're leaning on Dylan more as the primary runner, and I think we're going to see that continue this season. So I think they're both going to have a lot of fantasy value, but Dylan's the one who's younger. He's the one who's much cheaper, as Pat brought up. So yeah, I mean, I still feel like if you look at the marketplace, like he's not valued as high as he should be, given that he's going to give you immediate value and has a lot of upside to have his value potentially grow in the coming years.
Yeah, I really like that Dylan call, Pat. That's a really great one. Mine, I'm going to reach once again a little bit lower down the trough here and take a crack at Alexander Madison. And look, this is a lot, it's the similar situation to Pollard, but Madison right now is the straight backup. He's not getting as long a look as Pollard is from game to game. He'll come in and he'll get a set for himself to give Dalvin Cook a break. We would assume that'll happen a little bit more this year, just as running backs get older, the backups start to take a couple more carries. That's just, the way of life in the NFL at the position. But last year, Alexander Madison started 4 games, right? 4 games. What do you think he would rank if that was his average in those 4 starts? Where do you think he would rank among starting running backs in PPR last year, Andrew? What do you think?
Could I go higher than number 1? Or
it wasn't 1. It wasn't that high.
All right. I mean, I guess you still have Jonathan Taylor around, but yeah,
yes,
it must have been top 5.
4.
Okay,
he was 4th last year in points per game as a starter. He is a free agent next year. Someone is going to see his talent, barring some kind of crazy injury this year. It's the NFL, so it could happen. But he is going to be cheap this year to buy because he is a straight backup to Dalvin Cook. And next year, if he signs anywhere that needs a running back, which, is once again, you're buying a lottery ticket here. It's not a complete, project that you're buying. You're spending a little now. You're investing a little now to have this big payoff next season. But if he goes anywhere where they need a running back next year, he is going to be the number 1. And this is a dude that can carry the load. I mean, no one can do it like A.J. Dillon or Derrick Henry, but he's a guy that could do it like Dalvin Cook does, where he gets 20 to 25 touches in a game, has someone back behind him to get another 10 or 15 on a longer game or whatever, and he can be the head of a running back position for pretty much any team in the NFL. So like I said, the 4 games he started for Minnesota last season, and Minnesota is a good offense. I wouldn't call them great. They're solid. They have great stuff with Cook and Jefferson, and Cousins is fine. But this isn't like Alexander Madison taking him and dropping him in LA or something like that. But he was 4th. So he could end up in a better situation than this next year. He could end up in a worse situation and still have a lot more value than he has this year. So I think it's good to go down the list a little bit and snap up Alexander Madison. I have one more. And it's just, I said this about rookies, and it's just a point I'm going to start hitting home, and especially with the wide receivers when we get there. But Tyrion Davis-Price, I believe, is ranked like for ECR, and he'll come up once we hear some buzz. But he's in the 70s right now, so he's not valued as a ton. And just think about where everyone was taking Trey Sermon last year, and Elijah Mitchell was an afterthought. And I said this with when the Packers drafted Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. I said it when the Niners took Eli Mitchell and Trey Sermon. I like Mitchell better. They obviously don't want Sermon at all. So I think Davis-Price is going to be the second running back in San Francisco. I didn't really like him coming into the draft. I watched him a little more. He's a little better than I thought he was. And he held off some really good competition at LSU. LSU hasn't had a lot of good offense since Joe Burrow left right? So he's better than I thought, but the situation makes him very, very viable, and especially the price right now. So I'll throw a couple cheaper darts at Madison and Davis Price. Andrew, what do you think of those two guys?
Yeah, well, Davis Price is one of my favorite sleepers in rookie drafts. Him and this receiver that I'm going to mention coming up, just guys who are in
We're going to fight over that
great
whiteout, by the way.
environments. To okay, all right, I'm ready for it. But yeah, no, I feel like it's kind of crazy to me because there was so much Trey Sermon hype, and a lot of it had to do with draft capital compared to Elijah Mitchell. But I mean, look at the draft capital they spent on Davis Price. You know, they spent a 3rd round pick on him. It's hard. I don't really understand why a running back San Francisco took that early in the draft is completely flying under the radar like this. It's strange to me. I think people must have just been so badly burned by Sermon that they're blocking it all out. And it's true that, you know, draft capital doesn't get you any promises with Kyle Shanahan. So he's going to have to earn his way. But the thing is, he provides a dynamic I think that they want, which is a more physical dynamic compared to Elijah Mitchell, who is extremely fast and explosive, but was banged up a lot last year. So I do think they want to lighten the load a little bit for Mitchell. You know, Shanahan likes to have at least 2 running backs going at all times. So I think there's definitely an opening for Davis Price to get on the field immediately, and maybe even in some, you know, favorable circumstances like in red zone work and things like that. So yeah, I mean, he went in the 3rd round of my rookie draft, and you know, I feel like he's a steal there.
Yeah, you know, it's the Eli Mitchell didn't do it in college either. He was part of a 3-headed monster at Louisiana. So you can't come in. That's why he didn't stay healthy last year, right? He was the only good running back on the roster for a lot of the season. And so they gave him all the carries, but it also wore him out. So you got to get, you know, a 1-2 punch if you want Eli Mitchell to have success. What do you think of Madison and Davis Price here, Fitzy?
Well, I opened a box of sugary cereal this morning, and I was really hoping I was going to get a San Francisco running back's decoder ring at the bottom of it, but it was not there. So that leaves me to try to figure out what's going on there. Yeah, I mean, so on one hand, they spend this early-ish round draft capital on Tyrion Davis Price, but we saw them do this on Sermon, and they made Sermon disappear like a double crossing mobster last year. And we see Mitchell totally emerge. So man, I just don't know how to read this backfield, but I agree, for the price you're paying right now, like, why not take a shot for a guy who, if he plugs into this offense with that offensive line, could be very, very productive. So I'm all about taking the shot there. Madison's kind of interesting because I wonder if he, kind of wasted his prime running back years. We know those guys age fast. And is he hitting like the post prime of his career when he finally hits free agency? But, why not throw a penny in the wishing well at this point and hope he lands in a good spot next year? Because again, 41 in our rankings, not that expensive. I'm cautious, and I'm not expecting a major windfall with him, just because I don't know if anyone's going to hand him a featured role next year. But you do hope that if he lands somewhere in a healthy ecosystem and at least gets a chance to be, 1A or 1B in a committee, what you pay from now could turn a profit. Sure.
And I hope
if he sticks with the Vikings, I mean, like, if you re-sign with them, I mean, this is kind of what he can offer. Like, he's the highest upside handcuff there is in all of fantasy football. So there's value to that. And that's a value that both in redraft and dynasty, I feel like a lot of fantasy managers don't fully appreciate. I love to stock my entire bench in all my fantasy leagues with guys who are one injury away from a huge spike in value. And I think Madison's just a great example of that.
Andrew probably drafts a lot of Hassan Haskins this year as well. Yeah, because straight behind Derrick Henry, and kind of, no one's Derrick Henry, but he has the same style. So I like that.
He's a Michigan man, so let's not
he's a Michigan man. You can draft a Michigan man. Finally, we like it. Hey, if you're in an IDP league, you can take Aiden Hutchinson too. Let's move over to the wide receivers. Andrew got to the list first. So he got the rookie wide receiver I wanted to talk about here, but I'm interested in this first name as well. So tell us about the wide receivers that you have on the list that you want to buy cheap right now.
Okay. Well, first, I guess I'll mention the rookie since we've already alluded to him. I when you said you wanted to fight me for him, I thought you meant you disagreed with me, but I guess
no, it's going to be, who's going to love him more is the fight.
That's right. It's a battle. Okay. Well, Jalen Tolbert I'm sticking with Cowboys here, apparently, I guess. But yeah, I mean, he's just a very intriguing prospect to me, much like, Davis Price fell in a perfect situation for a running back. I feel like Tolbert fell in a perfect situation for a wide receiver. You want Cowboy wide receivers, and I think he's got pretty good size. He's 6'1". He's got pretty good speed, under a 4.5 40 time. He put up massive numbers in college. Now, it was Sun Belt Conference, but he also lit up Tennessee. So I think he averaged 123 yards per game receiving last season at South Alabama. So that's pretty good. I also just love the situation. I mean, I feel like, I've been talking about immediate opportunity and long-term opportunity. This is another guy that I feel like has both, because Michael Gallup is coming back off an ACL tear. He may not be ready for week 1. James Washington just kind of flamed out in Pittsburgh, and I think his best days are behind him. They were mostly in college, really. And, so I feel like the door is wide open for Tolbert to have an immediate impact and kind of earn snaps going forward once Gallup is fully ready to go. And then long term, I mean, Gallup was the kind of guy I would have wanted to have on my dynasty rosters these last few years, because he can have that wide receiver 3 value. And then if anything happens to Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb, suddenly he's like a high-end wide receiver 2. So if Tolbert just takes the Gallup role, that's good enough to be a great value at his current market price. But I also think it's not unthinkable that he could eventually even overtake Gallup. I mean, he's not going to overtake Lamb, but either way, I mean, the Cowboys can support 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers, and I think Tolbert will be in that big 3.
I think that Tolbert is better than Gallup, and I was a Gallup guy coming out of Colorado State. I just think there's a lot of Deontay Johnson in Tolbert's game, as far as, making those catches away from his body, making the impossible catches, that kind of stuff. Hopefully the drops aren't there for him as well. So yeah, we are definitely going to fight over Tolbert. I love it. So glad I'm not in any leagues with you so far. So we can both draft him. But who's your other wide receiver here?
Okay, so this one honestly surprised me, because I do not think of myself as a Christian Kirk guy at all. But I gotta say, like, his current value is insane to me, like, that it's so low. I mean, that contract generated a lot of ridicule this offseason, and it also kind of broke the fantasy or the free agent market, and ended up getting, Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill traded. So
the reason why we're going to see a lot of holdouts too was this contract.
Right, exactly.
Terry McLaurin not
messed
showing
up
up
a lot
to
of things.
Yeah.
But one thing it also did was it showed you just how committed the Jaguars are to this guy. Like, I think you're going to see targets funneled to Christian Kirk. And he actually was a borderline wide receiver 2 even last season, because DeAndre Hopkins got hurt. And, as our colleague Andrew Erickson pointed out, once in the games that Hopkins didn't play, Kirk actually was a top 10 PPR wide receiver. And that was because he was finally getting the chance to play out of the slot, which is his natural position, his natural strength. And that's exactly what he's going to do in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence, his best receivers in college, like he had a great connection with Amari Rodgers out of the slot. Even T. Higgins played in the slot sometimes, and he had a great rapport with him. So I think Lawrence is very comfortable throwing to the slot. I think if Trevor Lawrence hadn't had a somewhat disappointing season last year, there's no way that Christian Kirk's value would be this low. But the fact that that Lawrence has not broken out yet has really deflated Kirk's value, because I think he's the clear number 1 wide receiver on this team with this contract for at least the next 2 seasons. There's there'd be huge cap ramifications if they got rid of Kirk after 1 season. So he's at least 2 years going to get a ton of targets from an ascending quarterback who could be a total stud. And if Trevor Lawrence breaks out, I feel like he's just going to carry Christian Kirk's dynasty value up with him. And so there's just a ton of potential for profit here with Christian Kirk.
What do you think of those 2 wide receivers? I'm not in as much on Christian Kirk. There are great points that Andrew just laid out here. The slot, Trevor Lawrence breakout, all that good stuff. I just don't know if I can do it. Also Kirk went to Oklahoma, and I hate having Oklahoma players, but I'll take CeeDee Lamb. Like, the talent's there. The talent is there. But I'm not the biggest Kirk guy, but I obviously love Tolbert. We've talked about him many times on this show, Pat. What do you think about Kirk and Tolbert here?
Well, after doing so many shows with you this spring, Boggs, you've sold me on Jalen Tolbert. So, yeah, I like the pick a lot. And he does have, with the Gallup injury and the severity of it and how late it happened in the season, like that is going to create an opening for Tolbert to produce and prove himself right away, which is great. Kirk, I've been waiting for him to have that primary slot role. Like, I feel like that's the thing that has been holding him back. And now that it seems like he's going to be that guy, unless they dink around and give Laviska Shenault that and try to play Kirk outside. I don't think that's going to be the case. But this is what we've been waiting for. And my goodness, with what they're paying him, I mean, the Sultan of Brunei now borrows money from Christian Kirk. So they've got to use the guy. They have to use the guy. So I'm on board too. And it's kind of funny how the contract and the magnitude of it hasn't really moved the needle on Kirk's fantasy value at all. Maybe people perceive it as a big downgrade that he's going from Arizona to Jacksonville, but I think at least he can be more of a featured guy in Jacksonville.
Yeah, and I wanted to say also that, like, the fact that I had this sort of like general feeling of distaste for Christian Kirk, which it sounds like Boggs has as well, like, that actually that's what makes him a good buy. Because it's like nobody really wants to go out and buy Christian Kirk. Everyone thinks he got overpaid. Everyone thinks he's not worth that contract. So there's just kind of a lot of dunking going on Christian Kirk. And to me, that has deflated his dynasty value more than it should.
Yeah, look, whenever the community as a whole dislikes a guy, it's probably a solid time to go buy him, because he's going to be very cheap, because everywhere you turn, there's people like me going, yeah, guy never had a 1,000-yard season. All the stuff. You're going from an air raid to, a different offense in Jacksonville. You're going to an unproven quarterback versus Kyler Murray. Like, everyone will list off those points, but those points. That's why he was a free agent. So, to be a number one, but, that also got me in trouble a little bit with Marvin Jones last year. The same thought process, but luckily we'll be using a real NFL playbook and not the Urban Meyer same 5 plays at a different formations of Madden offense that they ran last year that became unbelievably wildly predictable here. So, Pat, you're up. Who do you got at wideout that you want to buy right now?
We have talked about this guy, Boggs. It's Kadarius Toney, who when he that week 4 and week 5 last year, what he showed us in that brief span. Game. Oh man. I mean, like, so I'm chasing the dragon here. Like, I want that. And what we saw with him in that special athleticism, like, he could be just such a special player, but then he had like 7 different injuries down the stretch last year. It wasn't just one severe injury. It was like
my throat, neck, chest. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. COVID, like the potpourri, man. I mean, he was just like a walking medical chart. So you hope for good health out of him. You hope that everything is kosher with him in the organization, because there were these rumors about him maybe being a trade possibility in the offseason. Because the idea of him playing in a Brian Daboll offense is kind of exciting to me. Like, I want to see what this guy can do if he's healthy in an invigorated offense that's not being run by Jason Garrett.
I have a bold prediction about Kadarius Toney too, Fitz. I think that before week 1, he is not on the Giants.
Really?
And I do. They drafted Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson is the same guy, right?
Kind of a redundant talent. I mean, I think Tony's I think he's a more special athlete.
I think so too. And that's the reason he was taken in the first round last year, even if it was by a group that is no longer with us in the NFL here, right? But Kadarius Toney being a first-round pick, there's also, we've talked about this too, Fitz, where first-round picks at whatever position, especially quarterback, but whatever position, are just looked at differently and given more opportunities if they do not succeed in their first stop. They're just because, a team goes, well, he's a first-round guy. First round talent, let's pick him up for a veteran minimum contract and see if he can do something. So you also have that built in, even if you were to buy and he didn't pop off, he's going to get another shot somewhere else. If it's not this year, next year, or the year after that, he will get another shot somewhere because he's a first round pick. How many shots did Percy Harvin get? I mean, guys like this, they get 1 million shots. So, I love buying on Kadarius Toney, especially when, there's some media stuff swirling about him. They, like Pat mentioned, great phrase, redundant talent on the roster with Wan'Dale Robinson. And Robinson is the guy that this coaching staff and front office drafted. They didn't take Toney, so they're going to be more beholden to their player personnel that they drafted and they wanted on their team. So I feel like Toney's gone and playing somewhere else, which I think is going to be great for him because there are a lot of good wide receivers in New York. And, but once again, as we said, this is a good time to go buy a guy like Toney, right, Andrew? The whole industry seems fairly down on him.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a big Tony fan in general. I'm kind of biased towards like big receivers, tall receivers. I'm always trying to get the next like DK Metcalf kind of a guy. So that's kind of where I'm like in my rookie drafts. I'm always prioritizing those type of players. But there's a lot to be said for timing the market too. So like I feel like there's no question to me that Tony's value is lower now than it would have been if he hadn't had those injuries. If there hadn't been all these rumors swirling, you're talking about all of the excess stuff that can easily be forgotten about in 1 week. If he goes off in week 1 for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, then nobody's going to be talking about any of that stuff anymore. So even if I don't necessarily look at him as a guy I would want to build my team around long term, I would still be very happy to swoop in now while his value is kind of low and acquire him now and then if he goes off a few games, then maybe I shop him and see what the market is like at that point. Because like I said, he's not necessarily the kind of receiver I build my teams around, but then again, you would miss out on a Tyreek Hill with that mentality too. So there are some guys that are just truly special in what they bring to the table. And, I'm curious to see if Toney can continue to prove that he is kind of the exception to the rule when it comes to these kind of receivers.
I also like the idea of flipping him like a house, Andrew. Like you just said, like you take him, you fix him up a little bit, you wait for him to put some good performances together, and you flip him again. So
Yep.
I turned my 3rd round pick into a 1st round pick. That's how we do it. So
it's the beauty of Dynasty.
I love that thought process as well. I mean, I do little things like that on occasion. My favorite bit is hoarding quarterbacks in a super flex league. You should probably start putting in more rules about how many quarterbacks you can have on your roster in those type of leagues, especially if they're beyond 12 man, 14 to 16, somewhere in that neighborhood. You should probably put a cap at like 4 players. But my wide receivers here, look, I kept going through the wide receivers. I didn't want to say this guy because I feel like I say his name too often, but it's Juju Smith-Schuster for me. I'm going to just hit this point home until we get there with him. He is 25 years old, still 25 years old. I think he's a couple months older than Velus Jones, who was just drafted, right? So, the guy is still unbelievably young. And he was injured last year. The season before that, he played with Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph throwing him the ball. He averaged 14.7 points per game, which last season would have had him as, I believe, 20 or 21, somewhere in that neighborhood. Low end wide receiver 2. FantasyPros ECR, he's wide receiver 40 right now on the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. And everyone says, oh, well, he was only good with Antonio Brown. They've got Travis Kelce in Kansas City and the best quarterback in the league throwing to him. I don't know what we're thinking with him. I know, this is homerism. I'm a Steelers fan, so I love Juju. And for laying out Vontaze Burfict, he will never do any wrong for me. Unless he does something heinous. If it's just TikToks, I do not care. Do all the TikToks you want. You planted Vontaze Burfict, but just in his fantasy value, I mean, he's averaged upward 18 points a game one season, which had him at wide receiver 9 in 2018. So the upside is still there. He's dealt with the corpse of Ben Roethlisberger, injuries to his person, and bad quarterback play in Pittsburgh. Now you put him on arguably the most dynamic offense in the league and make him the number 2 wide receiver receiving option on this team behind Travis Kelce. And I think he is going to go off. So I'm very excited about him and rookie wide receivers in general. This is a great class. I know that there wasn't a Jamar Chase. There wasn't a CeeDee Lamb in this class. These are all very good wide receivers. Williams is my one. I love Burks. I don't care about the asthma. I don't care about the route running. The guy makes plays. Throw it to him short and let him go. Garrett Wilson is outstanding. Chris Olave is one of the best route runners we've seen. John Metchie is going off in the 70s. The dude could be the number one wideout for the Texans, next year. Brandon Cooks doesn't seem to be long. I mean, they're gonna have a hard time cutting him. Do you know what his cap number is this year, guys? Brandon Cooks, $43.5 million is his cap hit. So 33 next year. So he'll be hard to cut, but there could be a team that's desperate. What would you rather do? Would you rather pay Christian Kirk or take that cap hit on Brandon Cooks for a year? I think most franchises would take the hit on Cooks. So for me, just rookie wide receivers in general. But Juju is, I just have to say it one more time here, Fitz, that Juju is being completely underrated. So what do you think about Juju, and what do you think about the rookies in general?
Totally with you on Juju. I mean, the dustiness level of Ben Roethlisberger these last couple of years cannot be overstated. So, and as you mentioned, I mean, Juju came into the league at such a young age, and
12.
had exactly and had this precocious production as a 17-year-old. No, I mean, he put up big numbers so early in his career. Like, that just couldn't have been a fluke, even if the circumstances were great with Antonio Brown there. So I'm a believer too. He's just going to benefit so much from playing with a top flight quarterback instead of one who's just clearly over the hill. And you and I haven't totally agreed on Metchie. Boggs, I know you're a bigger fan than I am. We'll see. I mean, like, some people are excited about Nico Collins, and maybe Andrew is one of those since he's a Michigan guy. So, maybe Nico is the heir apparent to Brandon Cooks in Houston. But, like, he's got a chance. I was just looking at Metchie in a startup draft, like, where he was falling, and I thought at that overall price, yeah, like, a rookie receiver who, like, showed some definite chops in college. Like, I think there's a chance. I'm more interested in him in Dynasty for sure than a redraft.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's coming
Obviously.
off the ACL surgery. He bled his knee in the SEC title game in December. And then, of course, Jameson did in the national championship. So he's a couple months ahead of Jameson, too. But, I mean, he's not Jameson Williams. He's not that level of talent. But he ain't Slade Bolden, which I feel like a lot of people want to put him in that. Well, he's slow and, blah, blah, blah. No, he could be a PPR monster. He's just not at the level that the top five guys are, but the top five guys are at an unbelievable level to me. So they're great. Andrew, what do you think about Juju in general? And it's pretty clear on this podcast that you have to agree with us. And also the rookies in general. Do you think the rookies go too low if they're mixed in a startup draft instead of a rookie draft?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think that, people look, I guess it depends. It's weird to think that there could be casual dynasty managers, but they do exist. And, some people might just look at last year's production and completely forget about some of these rookies. So that can push them down a little bit in those startup drafts, I think. But as far as Juju goes, yeah, I mean, I had to look when you said he was wide receiver 40. That's kind of surprising to me that he's that far down. I mean, I don't really know what to make of this Chiefs receiving core at this point. I mean, there's so many moving parts there. Yeah. And I'm a guy who has been, I acquired Mecole Hardman several years ago incredibly cheaply, and I've just been sort of clinging to him, hoping that one day that check is going to cash.
He was pretty good in the playoffs, man.
Yeah,
yeah.
And he's the natural replacement to run a lot of the routes that Tyreek Hill ran. So, I don't know. I mean, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is kind of a one-trick pony, deep threat. Sky Moore is, interesting, but young, and we'll have to see how quickly he acclimates to the NFL. There's just a ton of moving parts, but I guess if you had to pick one receiver there that's going to, put up big numbers from day one, it would be Juju. And I'm actually sort of surprised that there hasn't been more of a Juju bump based on going to Kansas City. So I can't say I feel enormously confident in him. I mean, I feel like he was in a good situation in Pittsburgh for a while, and obviously not when Duck was under center, but at various times, and sort of underperformed. So he's been sort of an enigma, I feel like, after coming into the league blazing hot, and it's been sort of a little frustrating since then. Not unlike Christian Kirk, honestly. Yeah. So we'll have to see. I'm kind of wait and see mode on Juju, but at the current price, I think you can't go wrong with that. I mean, and like you said, he's still younger than people realize.
Yeah, he's still very, very young. So a lot of meat on the bone, I feel like, for Juju. And Andrew, we did it, man. Thank you for joining us. And please plug everything you possibly can. Tell people what you have coming up, where your work is, and where they can find it.
Absolutely. So I do write for FantasyPros. I've been helping out with some of our Dynasty content, some player profiles there, and I'll be writing an article on veteran Dynasty wide receivers you can pick up. So I think I'll have to put Christian Kirk in there. And then I also have just been contributing to the Joe Pisapia's Black Book. You can find some of my work in there coming out June 1st, I believe. I run the rest of season rankings fantasy football podcast, which you can check out on Apple or Spotify. And I have a website, rosrankings.com. Right now we're doing a lot of baseball content. So we do updated rest of season rankings every single week. But come summertime, we're going to be doing that for football as well. So we'll have it to help people with their drafts. And then in season, we'll be updating our rest of season rankings each week as well.
Excellent. Fitzy at Fitz_FF on the Twitter machine. What do you got coming up, my man?
Am I allowed to talk about redraft on this show?
I will allow it.
Okay.
Only in the plug section.
We are prepping for next month's redraft kit, FantasyPros redraft kit. It's going to have everything you need for redraft leagues. And, you guys are both contributing to that. I've roped you into, doing work for that. I know you're going to immediately leave this podcast and go slave away on your articles for that. So, that's big enough. But we do continue to pump out Dynasty content at FantasyPros all throughout the summer. So we're not going to leave you in the lurch there. So that's it. And, I'm doing the Fits on Fantasy podcast every week. And, we'll be back in the saddle next week.
Absolutely, we will, and gonna have a good one. I have a decent idea. We'll see. We'll talk after the show and see if we want to do that. But that is going to wrap it up for us. You can find me on Twitter at Bogman Sports. Of course, I'm here on FantasyPros, inthisleague.com for my Patreon as well. The Welsh and I do fantasy baseball, fantasy football shows every week for you guys. Please check that out if you would. And you can find all my work at Bogman Sports on the Twitter. But we will see you guys next week. Take it easy, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.